First contact in the storm. The dust storm came without warning, transforming the Arizona desert into a roiling sea of red-brown clouds. Sarah Chen cursed under her breath as she guided her weathered Jeep along the barely visible dirt road. After 15 years as a combat medic in global hotspots, she'd chosen this remote spot precisely for its solitude. Now that same isolation could prove deadly if she lost her way. A flash of blue light cut through the storm's fury, so bright it left afterimages dancing in her vision. Sarah hit the brakes, the Jeep sliding slightly on the loose sand. That wasn't lightning. She'd seen enough combat to know energy weapons when she spotted them. Another flash illuminated what looked like a crash site about half a mile off the road. "Don't do it, Chen," she muttered to herself. Even as she was reaching for the medical kit, she still kept fully stocked out of habit. This isn't Kandahar anymore. Not your problem. But her feet were already moving, muscle memory from countless rescue operations taking over. The storm worked in her favor, concealing her approach as she crept toward the source of the light. What she found stopped her in her tracks. A sleek craft about the size of a small plane lay partially buried in the sand, its silvery hull cracked open like an egg. It was clearly not of Earth origin. More importantly, a trail of luminescent blue droplets led away from the wreck. Blood, or something like it. Sarah followed the trail, her medical training warring with basic survival instinct. The droplets led to a shallow cave formed by overhanging rocks. In the cave's shadow, two figures huddled together. One was clearly injured, curled protectively around the smaller figure. "I'm here to help," Sarah called out, keeping her hands visible as she approached. "I'm a medic." The larger figure raised its head, revealing features that were almost human but not quite. The skin was pale lavender, with delicate scaling around the temples. Luminescent markings traced patterns along its neck and arms, pulsing weakly. The smaller figure, clearly a child, pressed closer to what Sarah assumed was its mother. "The hunters," the adult alien whispered in perfect English, though the voice had an odd harmonic quality. "They'll track us." "Let me worry about that," Sarah replied, already assessing the alien's injuries. A deep gash ran along its side, leaking that same blue fluid she tracked. "I need to stop this bleeding. Can you understand me?" The alien nodded. "I am Naira. This is my daughter, Kei. We are refugees." Sarah pulled supplies from her kit, grateful that her training had covered xenobiology during the first confirmed alien contacts 5 years ago. "I'm Sarah. Let's get you stable. Then we can talk about who's hunting you." Working quickly, Sarah applied a synthetic seal to the wound. The alien's anatomy was different, but similar enough that her medical training still applied. The child watched with huge, iridescent eyes that reminded Sarah of opals. "The storm will cover our tracks," Sarah said as she finished. "My home is about 10 miles from here. It's isolated, well stocked with medical supplies, and I know how to stay off the grid. Your choice, but you're not going to last long out here." Naira's luminescent markings pulsed brighter for a moment. "Why would you help us? You know nothing about us or our situation." Sarah packed up her kit, memories of other refugees, other war zones, flashing through her mind. "Because someone once helped me when they didn't have to. Because your daughter looks scared and hungry. Because it's what humans do, or at least, what we should do." A distant whine cut through the storm's howl. Engines, getting closer. Naira stiffened, pulling Kei closer. "They're coming," she whispered. "The hunters never give up." Sarah helped Naira to her feet, supporting her weight. "Then let's not be here when they arrive. I've gotten pretty good at disappearing over the years." They made their way back to the Jeep as quickly as Naira's injury allowed. The storm worked in their favor, obscuring their retreat. Sarah could hear the search patterns of aircraft overhead, but the dust storm's interference would play havoc with any scanning equipment. As she drove them toward her home, taking the circuitous route out of habit, Sarah glanced in her rearview mirror at Kei. The alien child had fallen asleep against her mother, looking so much like any exhausted refugee child Sarah had treated over the years. Different color, different species, but the same vulnerability, the same need for protection. "Your daughter," Sarah said softly. "How old is she?" "By your measurements, about 7 cycles," Naira replied, her markings dimming as she conserved energy. "She's never known peace. Our people. We were scientists once, explorers. Now we're hunted across the stars for what we know. What could be worth hunting children for?" "The key to traveling between dimensions," Naira said, her voice heavy. "Our researchers discovered it, but some saw it as a weapon, a way to invade countless realities. Those of us who refused to weaponize it were branded traitors. They hunt us to eliminate any chance of the knowledge spreading." Sarah processed this as she navigated through the storm. Dimensional travel. It sounded like science fiction, but then again, so would her current situation have seemed a few hours ago. "My home has a basement level," she said finally. "Converted it into a medical bay years ago. Just in case, we can set up there while you heal. After that, well, let's focus on getting you stable first." Naira's markings pulsed briefly. "They'll track us eventually. They always do." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Maybe. But they've never dealt with someone trained in counterinsurgency medicine. You'd be amazed how good I am at keeping people hidden who don't want to be found." The Jeep crested a rise, and Sarah's home came into view. A modest ranch house that looked unassuming, but held more secrets than its simple exterior suggested. As she pulled into the camouflage garage, Sarah realized she'd already made her decision. Whatever came next, she was committed now. Sometimes the biggest choices came down to simple human decency. She'd learned that lesson the hard way, and she wasn't about to forget it now, even if it meant harboring interdimensional refugees. "Welcome home," she said, helping Naira, and a groggy Key from the vehicle. "Let's get you two fixed up proper." In the distance, the storm raged on, concealing their tracks, while above, the hunters' ships continued their futile search patterns. Sarah Chen, former combat medic and now alien harborer, led her unexpected guests into the safety of her home, already planning their next moves. The war for dimensional travel might be beyond her understanding, but protecting the vulnerable, that was something she knew down to her bones. Trust and healing. Sarah's basement medical bay had treated its share of patients over the years, but never one whose blood glowed blue under the LED lights. Naira lay on the examination table, her luminescent markings pulsing steadily as Sarah carefully cleaned and properly dressed her wound. "The molecular sealant should hold," Sarah said, checking her handiwork. "Your biology's different, but the basic principles of tissue repair seem similar enough." She glanced at Key, who sat quietly in the corner, watching every movement. "Are you hungry? I've got food upstairs." "Our digestive systems can process most carbon-based organic matter," Naira explained. "We haven't eaten in 3 planetary cycles." Sarah nodded, keeping her face neutral despite her shock at how long they'd gone without food. "Let's start with something simple then. Soup might be best." She turned to Key with a gentle smile. "Would you like to help me in the kitchen?" The alien child looked to her mother, who nodded encouragement. As they climbed the stairs, Sarah noticed how Key's movements were becoming more fluid, less fearful. The child's own luminescent markings, fainter than her mother's, flickered with what Sarah hoped was curiosity. In the kitchen, Sarah began preparing a basic vegetable soup while Key watched from a safe distance. "Those patterns on your skin," Sarah said conversationally, "they're beautiful. Do they mean something?" Kay touched one of her markings self-consciously. When she spoke, her voice was melodic, like wind chimes. "They tell our stories. Mother says mine are still growing because I'm still writing my story." Sarah smiled, chopping carrots. "That's a lovely way to think about it. What story do you want to write?" "I want to go home," Key said softly, "but not how it is now. Home before the bad ones came." Sarah's hand stilled on the cutting board. "What happened?" "The bad ones wanted Mother's research. They said it would make them strong. Let them go anywhere. Mother said no. She said some knowledge isn't meant for hurting. Key's markings dimmed slightly. Then they started making people disappear. Sarah resumed chopping, processing this information. Your mother's very brave. She says running away isn't brave. Sometimes knowing when to run is the bravest thing you can do, Sarah replied, thinking of her own past. Especially when you're protecting someone you love. The soup was simmering when Sarah's security system gave a subtle alert. Movement on the perimeter. She checked the cameras calmly, not wanting to alarm Key. A dust devil whirled across her property, but within it, she caught the telltale shimmer of active camouflage. Kay, why don't you take some soup down to your mother? I need to check something upstairs. Once the child was safely below, Sarah moved to her weapons safe. The rifle she retrieved wasn't standard issue. It had been modified to handle various types of ammunition, including some decidedly not of Earth origin. She'd made interesting contacts over the years. The hunters were getting closer, using the lingering storm as cover. Their technology was advanced, but Sarah hadn't survived this long by relying on technology alone. She activated her home's defense systems, a mix of conventional and reverse-engineered alien tech she'd acquired through carefully cultivated channels. Below, she heard Key's musical voice telling her mother about helping make soup. Sarah smiled grimly as she checked her rifle's charge. She'd meant what she said about bravery and running. But sometimes you had to stand your ground. The first hunter materialized near her garden, its armor a shifting pattern that mimicked the swirling dust. Sarah watched through her scope as two more appeared, moving with predatory grace. Their weapons were sleek, deadly-looking things that hummed with power. But they were looking for running prey, not a defended position. Sarah had turned her entire property into a hardened site years ago, paranoid preparations that now seemed prescient. As the hunters spread out, they triggered her first line of defense, electromagnetic pulses that played havoc with their camouflage systems. The hunters' forms flickered visible, revealing armored figures that looked almost insectoid. Their heads swiveled, searching for the source of the interference. Sarah smiled. Let them search. Every step brought them further into her web. Below, she heard Nyara's voice raised in alarm. They're here. We have to. Stay put, Sarah called down calmly. This is what I do. Trust me. The hunters were regrouping, their weapons charging with an ominous whine. Sarah watched through her scope as they moved toward the house in standard assault formation. Professional. Experienced. But they were used to hunting desperate refugees, not facing prepared resistance. Sarah's next surprise was more direct. Concentrated sonic pulses that targeted the frequency their armor operated on. Two of the hunters staggered, their systems momentarily disrupted. The third managed to fire, but its shot went wide, absorbed by the house's reinforced walls. Amateur, Sarah muttered, squeezing her trigger. The rifle's recoil was negligible as it fired a burst of magnetically accelerated rounds. The lead hunter's armor held, but the impact sent it sprawling. Its companions scattered, seeking cover that wasn't there. Sarah's gardens might look decorative, but every rock and tree had been placed with fields of fire in mind. The hunters found themselves exposed, their advanced technology countered by simple tactical preparation. When her second shot pierced one hunter's armor, the others finally realized they weren't facing helpless prey. Their retreat was swift and professional, but Sarah wasn't interested in pursuing. She maintained her watch position until she was certain they were gone, then did another sweep with her security systems. Only then did she return to the basement. Nyara and Key huddled together in the medical bay, their markings pulsing with anxiety. They'll be back, Nyara said, with reinforcements. Probably, Sarah agreed, setting her rifle aside. But not tonight. Eat your soup before it gets cold. You fought them, Key said, her markings brightening with something like hope. No one fights them. Sarah checked Nyara's wound, satisfied it was healing cleanly. Someone should have. Look, I meant what I said about helping you. But I need to know everything. about the dimensional research, about who's hunting you, about all of it. We can't make a plan without information. Nayara was quiet for a moment, her markings shifting in complex patterns. Finally, she nodded. Our people discovered that reality is flexible. That with the right understanding, the right technology, we could step between worlds. But some saw it as a weapon, a way to conquer not just planets, but entire dimensions. Those who refused to help were branded traitors. The hunters, they're called the Void Guard. They ensure no one shares the knowledge with other species. And now they're on Earth, Sarah said thoughtfully. Which means Earth is involved whether we want to be or not. She pulled up a chair. Tell me everything. If we're going to survive this, we need to understand what we're really fighting. As Nayara began to explain, Sarah listened intently, her tactical mind already working on possibilities. The hunters would indeed return, but next time, she'd be even better prepared. Sometimes the best way to help people was to fight for them. That, at least, was something she understood perfectly well. The storm outside had finally begun to fade, revealing a sky filled with stars. Somewhere up there, forces were moving that could change everything. But for now, in this basement, two species shared soup and stories, finding common ground in the simple human act of helping those in need. Hunters in the night. 3 days after the first attack, Sarah sat cleaning her rifle while monitoring the desert night through her security feeds. The initial skirmish had bought them time, but she knew better than to think it was over. The Void Guard wouldn't abandon their pursuits so easily. Your weapons are primitive, Nayara observed from her seat near the medical bay computers. Her wound had healed enough to allow movement, the blue luminescence of her markings growing stronger each day. Sarah smiled without looking up. Sometimes primitive works best. Your hunters rely too heavily on their tech. Makes them predictable. She reassembled the rifle with practiced ease. Besides, some of my primitive weapons have benefited from what we learned studying crashed ships like yours. There have been others. Nayara's markings pulsed with surprise. Earth's been a waypoint for refugees like you for longer than most humans know. Some of us help where we can. Sarah set the rifle aside. Which is why I have contacts you need to meet. People who can help get you somewhere safer. Before Nayara could respond, one of the security monitors flashed red. Sarah was on her feet instantly, checking the feed. Multiple heat signatures approached through the desert night, moving with military precision. They're back, she said grimly. More than last time. At least 8, maybe more hanging back. She turned to Nayara. Get key and head to the panic room we discussed. No arguments. Nayara gathered her sleeping daughter from the cot in the corner. You cannot fight them all. Don't plan to. Just need to hold them long enough. Sarah was already moving to her weapons cache, retrieving specialized ammunition and what looked like modified grenades. My contacts are on their way. 20 minutes. That's all we need. The approaching hunters were better prepared this time. Sarah watched through her security feeds as they methodically disabled her outer perimeter defenses. Their armor had been modified to resist her sonic attacks, and they moved with the confidence of predators who'd learned from their previous failure. But Sarah had been busy too. As the hunters breached her first defensive line, she triggered her new countermeasures. Quantum-laced chaff filled the air, playing havoc with their advanced sensors. In the confusion, she picked off 2 with precisely placed shots before they could adapt. The remaining hunters took cover, their weapons charging with that distinctive whine. Energy bolts lit up the night, impacting against her home's reinforced walls. The house's shields, reverse-engineered from salvaged alien tech, held, but the drain on her power systems was significant. Come on, Sarah muttered, checking the time. Where are you guys? As if in answer, new alerts lit up her screens. Multiple vehicles approaching fast from the east. The cavalry, right on time. Sarah allowed herself a tight smile as she triggered her last surprise for the hunters. Hidden emitters activated, flooding the battlefield with a carefully tuned electromagnetic pulse. The hunters' armor locked up, their systems temporarily paralyzed. In that moment of vulnerability, Sarah's reinforcements arrived. 3 unmarked black vehicles skidded to a stop in a perfect containment pattern. Teams of humans in advanced combat gear deployed with practiced efficiency. Their weapons were definitely not standard issue, combining human ingenuity with alien tech. "Better late than never," Sarah muttered into her comm. "Had to make sure we weren't followed," a familiar voice replied. "You okay in there, Chen?" "Just peachy, Martinez. Your timing's still terrible." The firefight was brief but intense. The hunters recovered quickly, but they found themselves caught between Sarah's defensive position and a well-equipped human strike team. Even their advanced armor couldn't withstand the combined assault. When it was over, Sarah did a final security sweep before heading to the panic room. Nyara and Kay emerged cautiously, their markings pulsing with anxiety. "Your people," Nyara began. "Part of a network," Sarah explained. "Been helping folks like you for years, keeping Earth's involvement in the wider galaxy quiet while we get our act together." She gestured to the newcomers securing the area outside. "We're not as helpless as some species think." Martinez entered, removing his tactical helmet. "Package secure." Sarah nodded. Mother and daughter. Dimensional travel researchers. Their people's government went bad, started hunting anyone who wouldn't weaponize the tech. Classic story. Martine sighed. "Safe house is prepped. We move as soon as the area's clean." Kai tugged at Sarah's sleeve. "Are you coming with us?" Sarah knelt down to the alien child's level. "Can't, kiddo. Need to stay here, help the next folks who need it. But where you're going, you'll be safe. Lots of friends there, some even from your world." "There are others." Nyara's markings brightened. "We thought we were alone." "Earth's bigger than your hunters realize," Martinez said. "Lots of places to hide, if you know where to look. And we've gotten pretty good at hiding things." As the cleanup crews worked outside, Sarah helped Nyara and Key gather what few possessions they had. The alien child's markings had shifted to a pattern Sarah hadn't seen before. "What does that pattern mean?" she asked softly. Kay touched her glowing skin. "Mother says it means hope, like your stars at night." Sarah smiled, remembering her own words about stories written in light. "Good. Hold on to that." She turned to Nara. "The Safe House Network will get you to others who escaped. Scientists, mostly, working on using dimensional travel for exploration, not war." "Why do humans help us?" Nyara asked. "You risk much." Sarah thought about all the refugee camps she'd worked in, all the desperate people she'd treated. Different worlds, same stories. Because someone has to. Because every time we help someone reach for the stars instead of trying to control them, we make the universe a little better. Martinez called from outside. Time to move. As Sarah watched the convoy disappear into the desert night, she knew the Void Guard would be back eventually. But they'd find Earth harder to intimidate than they expected. Sometimes the most human thing you could do was stand up for others, even if those others came from the stars themselves. The underground network. The Safe House was an old mining complex, buried deep in New Mexico's Sacramento Mountains. Sarah stood in its main operations center, surrounded by screens showing surveillance feeds from across the globe. Each one tracked potential incursions by the Void Guard, their ships appearing as ghostly signatures in Earth's atmosphere. "They're getting bolder," Martinez said, pointing to a cluster of readings over Eastern Europe. 3 incursions in the past week. They're not even trying to hide anymore. Sarah studied the patterns, remembering Nyara's descriptions of how the hunters operated. They're not just looking for her and Key anymore. They're searching for the network. Smart woman. The new voice belonged to Director Helena Walsh, the silver-haired woman who coordinated Earth's covert refugee protection program. The Void Guard finally realized Earth isn't just a random waypoint. We're organized. The director led them deeper into the facility, passing rooms filled with mixed teams of humans and aliens working on various projects. Sarah spotted several beings with markings similar to Naira's, their luminescent patterns creating complex diagrams in the air as they worked. How many? Sarah asked quietly. Over 200 dimensional travel researchers and their families, spread across 12 secure sites worldwide. Helena replied. Been building this network for 15 years, ever since the first refugees warned us what was coming. They entered a secure laboratory where Naira stood before a holographic display, her markings pulsing as she explained something to a mixed team of human and alien scientists. Key sat nearby, drawing patterns that seemed to shift and move on her digital tablet. Your friends have been invaluable, Helena said. Naira's insights into dimensional mechanics have accelerated our understanding significantly. And Key, she smiled. That child has an intuitive grasp of dimensional mathematics that amazes even our experts. Sarah watched the alien child draw, remembering their conversation about stories written in light. They're still in danger, though. The Void Guard won't stop. No, they won't. Helena's expression hardened, which is why we're accelerating our timetable. Naira, would you explain? The alien scientist joined them, her markings forming complex geometric patterns. We've discovered something extraordinary. Earth's position in dimensional space is unique, a nexus point where multiple realities naturally intersect. It's why so many refugees instinctively fled here. Your world acts as a natural dimensional harbor. Which means, Sarah prompted, it means Earth is perfectly positioned to create stable dimensional corridors. Martinez cut in. Safe passages between realities, but only if they're opened from here. The Void Guard's leaders suspected this, Naira continued. It's why they've become so aggressive. If they control Earth, they control all possible dimensions. But if Earth establishes its own dimensional travel network first, we can offer safe passage to refugees across multiple realities. Helena finished. Create sanctuaries the Void Guard can't reach. But we need time to complete the technology. Sarah understood immediately. Time you won't have if they launch a full invasion, which they're clearly building toward. Exactly. Helena led them to a tactical display showing global defense positions. We've been preparing for this. Reverse-engineered technology, trained personnel, defensive systems in key locations. But the Void Guard's first major strike will likely come here. They'll have tracked Naira's energy signature. You're using them as bait, Sarah realized, anger edging her voice. It was my choice, Naira said softly. My people's knowledge caused this crisis. It should help end it. An alert blared through the complex. Multiple screens showed new signatures entering Earth's atmosphere, larger than anything they'd seen before. Battle carriers, Naira whispered, her markings pulsing with fear. They're done hunting. This is an invasion fleet. Helena was already moving, barking orders into her comm. Around them, the facility transformed from research center to military command post. Scientists rushed to secure their work while security teams moved to defensive positions. How long do you need to complete the dimensional corridor? Sarah asked. Hours, Naira replied. But once it's operational, we can evacuate our people to safe realities. Build a network they can't control. Sarah checked her weapons, including several new pieces of hybrid tech she'd been issued. Then we'll buy you those hours. Outside, the night sky lit up with the first exchanges of fire. Earth's hidden defenses engaged the Void Guard's advance forces. But the real battle would be here, where a handful of humans and alien refugees fought to protect not just one world, but countless possible ones. Sarah found Kay still drawing, her markings forming patterns that seemed to echo the dimensional mathematics being discussed around her. The child looked up, her alien features somehow conveying very human worry. More bad ones coming. Yes, Sarah said honestly, but remember what I told you about your markings, about writing your own story. Key nodded. Well, this is humanity's story, and we're pretty good at writing chapters that surprise people. Above them, the battle for Earth's dimensional harbors was beginning. But Sarah Chen, former combat medic turned defender of refugee aliens, allowed herself a small smile. The Void Guard was about to learn that humans had gotten very good at fighting for lost causes. And sometimes, those lost causes turned out to be the ones most worth fighting for. A new dawn. The battle for Earth's dimensional harbors raged through the night. Sarah crouched behind a reinforced barrier, watching energy bolts from Void Guard weapons light up the New Mexico sky. Beside her, Martinez coordinated their defensive teams through encrypted comms. East Sector breached. A voice crackled through the channel. They're pushing toward the main lab complex. Sarah checked her hybrid weapons charge. They're not going for a full invasion. This is a surgical strike team. Trying to capture the dimensional travel research, Martinez agreed. Take it back to their leaders. Deep in the facility below, Nyara and her fellow scientists raced to complete the dimensional corridor. Every minute they held the line bought humanity a chance at something greater than mere survival. The Void Guard advanced with brutal efficiency, their armor shrugging off conventional weapons. But humanity had learned from years of protecting dimensional refugees. Their defensive positions were anchored by reverse-engineered shield generators. Hybrid weapons combined Earth's practical engineering with alien principles. Remember, Sarah called to her team, they rely on tech and intimidation. We fight smart. We fight together. The hunters had numbers and advanced technology, but they'd never faced an organized human resistance. Sarah's teams used the terrain, drawing them into prepared killing zones. Every step forward cost the Void Guard dearly. In the command center, Director Helena coordinated the global response. Other facilities around the world were under attack, but this was the main thrust. Everything hinged on protecting the Dimensional Corridor project. Status report, Helena demanded. Nyara's voice came through, steady despite the chaos. Final calibrations underway. The corridor is forming, but we need 15 more minutes to stabilize it. You've got 10, Helena replied, watching more Void Guard ships enter atmosphere. After that, we'll be overrun. Sarah led a counterattack against hunters breaching the inner perimeter. Her team moved with practiced coordination, hybrid weapons disrupting the Void Guard's advanced systems. But for every hunter they dropped, 2 more took its place. Fall back to secondary positions, she ordered. Make them work for every inch. A massive explosion rocked the facility. Through the smoke, Sarah saw a towering figure emerge, a Void Guard commander in enhanced battle armor. Its weapons were larger, more powerful than its troops. Surrender the dimensional research, it broadcasted in multiple languages. Your resistance is futile and unauthorized. Sarah's response was a precisely placed shot that staggered the commander. Here's your authorization. The battle intensified. The commander's enhanced weapons began systematically destroying their defensive positions. Sarah's teams adapted, split, reformed, refusing to break. They weren't just fighting for Earth now. They were fighting for every reality the Void Guard would invade if they won. Below, Kay watched the battle through security feeds, her markings pulsing with anxiety. But instead of fear, her patterns showed something else. Determination. She turned to her mother at the dimensional controls. Mother, the patterns. I can see them. Nyara looked up from her work. Her daughter's markings were forming complex mathematical sequences, dimensional coordinates falling into place like pieces of a puzzle. Helena, Nyara called urgently. Key sees it, the perfect resonance pattern. We can stabilize the corridor. The child's intuitive grasp of dimensional mathematics proved to be the key. As Void Guard forces pushed closer to the lab, Key helped the scientists align the corridor precisely with Earth's natural dimensional harbors. Sarah's teams were nearly overwhelmed when the corridor activated. The air itself seemed to shimmer as multiple realities intersected. Through the dimensional windows, they could see other Earths, other possibilities, and thousands of refugees ready to help. Now, Helena ordered. The corridor flared to life. From multiple realities, ships appeared. Vessels crewed by dimensional refugees who'd found sanctuary on other Earths. They engaged the Void Guard from angles their hunters had never anticipated. The Void Guard commander staggered under combined fire from 3 different dimensions. Impossible. No species has achieved stable, multi-dimensional coordination. That's your problem, Sarah said, targeting a weak point in its armor. You keep underestimating what humans will do to protect others. The battle turned. Caught between determined Earth defenders and ships from multiple realities, the Void Guard's surgical strike faltered. Their rigid tactical doctrine had no counter for fighting across dimensions. In the lab, Key's markings blazed with triumph as she helped coordinate the dimensional allies. The patterns on her skin told a new story, not of running and hiding, but of standing and fighting. The Void Guard commander, its armor failing, made a final push toward the lab. Sarah intercepted it, her hybrid weapon unleashing its full power. "This is humanity's harbor," she declared, "and we decide who finds sanctuary here." The commander fell. Above, the remaining Void Guard ships retreated, their invasion force broken by an alliance they'd never imagined possible. In the aftermath, Sarah found Nyara and Key in the lab, their markings showing patterns of joy and relief. "Your daughter's mathematics," she said. "It saved us all." Kay smiled. "I just helped write the story. Humans made it real." Director Helena joined them, surveying the dimensional windows showing multiple peaceful Earths. "This changes everything. Earth isn't just a waypoint anymore. We're a junction between realities." "The Void Guard will return," Nyara cautioned. "Let them," Martine said, checking his weapon. "We'll be ready, all of us, across every reality they try to threaten." Sarah watched refugees and humans working together to repair the facility. The dimensional corridors hummed with possibility, offering hope not just to one world, but to countless ones. "You know what this means," she said to Kay. "Your markings will have lots of new stories to tell." The alien child's patterns shifted to show a new configuration, one that spoke of friendship across dimensions, of courage in the face of tyranny, and of the simple human truth that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in weapons or technology, but in the willingness to help others. Above them, Earth's sky had cleared of battle. But through the dimensional corridors, they could see countless stars across countless realities. And in each one, the story of how humanity helped create a network of sanctuary would be told in patterns of light and hope. For Sarah Chen, former combat medic and now defender of dimensional refugees, it was just the beginning of a much larger story. One written not in the language of war, but in the universal tongue of compassion. And that, she knew, was the most human story of all.